The council chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive structure that had witnessed 1,000 years of galactic diplomacy. Inside, representatives from 200 different species sat in carefully arranged sections, each designed to accommodate their unique physiologies. The air was filtered and balanced to satisfy dozens of different breathing requirements. Translation devices hummed softly, converting thoughts and sounds into universal understanding. Ambassador Taman stood at the human delegation's platform, his hands resting calmly on the speaking podium. He had prepared for this moment for 3 months. The proposal displayed on holographic screens throughout the chamber showed new trade routes that would benefit 47 species, including several struggling frontier colonies. The math was sound. The logistics were proven. The benefits were clear to anyone who took the time to review the data. He finished his presentation and waited. The chamber remained silent. Not the thoughtful silence of consideration, but the empty silence of dismissal. High Chancellor Mordock, whose insectoid form gleamed under the chamber lights, clicked his mandibles together in what his species considered a gesture of amusement. The translation came through cold and clear. The human delegation has presented interesting ideas. Perhaps in another century, when your species has gained more experience in galactic affairs, such proposals might warrant serious discussion. Taman kept his expression neutral. This was not unexpected. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Council for only 15 years. A mere heartbeat in the timeline of civilizations that measured their histories in millennia. He had anticipated resistance. He had prepared counter-arguments. What came next, he had not anticipated. Councillor Velrin, whose amphibious body rested in a contained water environment, gestured with one webbed hand. His voice carried the weight of someone who had sat on the council for 300 years. Perhaps it would be educational for our young friends to understand why their proposal cannot be taken seriously. The holographic displays throughout the chamber flickered and changed. Taman felt his blood run cold as he recognized what appeared on the screens. Fleet positions, defense grids, colony locations, classified military data that humanity had provided to the Council under strict confidentiality agreements. Information that revealed every vulnerable point in human space. As you can see, Velrin continued, his tone almost bored, humanity's current defensive capabilities are stretched thin across their territory. They lack the resources to protect even their own space adequately. How then can they propose to manage trade routes that would require significant security commitments? Taman's jaw tightened. Around the chamber, he could see various species studying the classified data with interest. Some were allies. Some were neutral. Some were barely contained threats that had eyed human colonies with predatory interest for years. And now they all had detailed maps of human weaknesses. Captain Heejin's voice came through his earpiece, tight with barely controlled anger. Sir, we're watching this from the observation deck. Give me the word. Taman took a slow breath. He looked across the chamber at Velrin, then up at Chancellor Mordock. He thought about the 3 months of work his team had invested in this proposal. He thought about the diplomatic protocols, the careful negotiations, the trust humanity had extended by sharing their military secrets with this council. Then he thought about his grandfather, who had survived the corporate wars by knowing when a table was rigged against him. Ambassador? Heejin prompted. Taman reached forward and closed his presentation files. The movement drew attention. He straightened his jacket with deliberate care, then gathered his data tablets into his briefcase. The chamber's ambient noise began to fade as species noticed his actions. The human delegation, Taman said quietly, his voice amplified by the chamber's systems, wishes to thank the council for its time. He turned and walked toward the exit. His 4 staff members, who had been seated behind him, immediately stood and followed. Their footsteps echoed in the suddenly silent chamber. Ambassador Taman, Mordock called out, confusion evident even through the translator. The session is not concluded. Taman paused at the chamber door. He turned back, his face calm and professional. Councillor Velrin has made the situation clear. Humanity lacks the experience and capability to contribute meaningfully to galactic affairs. We acknowledge this wisdom. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Therefore, we see no purpose in continuing to waste the Council's valuable time. He walked out. The door sealed behind him with a soft hiss. In the observation deck, Captain Heejin was already moving. She touched her communicator. All human personnel. Begin evacuation procedures. Execute protocol Exodus. Throughout the station, human staff members received the same message. In embassies, trade offices, research facilities, and military liaison quarters, humans began efficiently packing. They were calm, methodical, professional. There was no panic, no shouting, no drama. They simply began to leave. Back in the council chamber, Mordak clicked his mandibles in what might have been laughter. It seems the children are having a tantrum. They will return when they have calmed down. Several council members joined in the amusement. Velrin settled back in his water tank, apparently satisfied that he had put the upstart species in their proper place. But some council members were not laughing. The Trell ambassador, whose species had worked closely with humans for a decade, was frantically accessing his communication system. The Rin counselor, young by galactic standards at only 70 years, watched the sealed door with an expression that might have been concern. 20 minutes later, the first reports began arriving. Human trade ships throughout Council space were breaking orbit, canceling contracts, and heading for the borders. Human researchers were downloading their personal files and closing their laboratories. Human military liaisons were wiping their computers and preparing to depart. An hour after that, the human embassy on the Council's primary world went dark. The building was empty, cleaned, and locked. Every piece of human technology had been removed. Every shared project had been dissolved with proper legal notifications. Every contract had been terminated with the exact language required by galactic commercial law. Mordak called for attention in the chamber. Send a message to Ambassador Taman. Tell him that the Council expects all members to fulfill their obligations. The communication officer worked at his console, then looked up with confusion. Chancellor, the human delegation's ship has already jumped to hyperspace. All human vessels have departed the sector. The embassy communication channels are offline. Then send the message to human space. The officer worked for another moment. Sir, I am unable to establish contact. All human communication nodes in Council space have been deactivated. The border relay stations are no longer accepting our connections. Velrin shifted in his tank. They cannot simply leave. The Trell ambassador stood, his voice cutting through the growing murmur of confusion. Actually, under Section 47 of the Council Charter, any member species may voluntarily withdraw from Council membership with 6 months' notice. The provision has not been invoked in 800 years, but it is still valid law. A data packet arrived at the Chancellor's console. Mordak opened it and found a formal legal document, time-stamped and properly filed. Ambassador Taman had submitted humanity's withdrawal notification exactly 17 minutes after Velrin had broadcast the classified data. The document cited breach of trust and confidentiality as justification for immediate cessation of all cooperative activities, with the mandatory 6-month notice period to begin immediately. The document was flawless. The language was precise. The legal reasoning was airtight. Humanity had not stormed out in anger. They had executed a planned withdrawal with the efficiency of a military operation. In the observation deck, now empty of human presence, a single message beacon continued to broadcast on all frequencies. The message was simple. Humanity thanks the Galactic Council for 15 years of membership. We have learned much. We wish you continued prosperity. This decision is final. The Galactic Council sat in their chamber and slowly realized what they had lost. And in the darkness beyond their station, human ships were already jumping to hyperspace, heading home, leaving behind a galaxy that had never truly valued their presence. 3 days had passed since Ambassador Taman walked out of the council chamber. Director Junho sat in his office deep within the Intelligence Ministry building, watching the evacuation reports scroll across his screens. Every single human in Council space was coming home, and the operation was proceeding exactly as he had planned 5 years ago. People called him paranoid. When he had first proposed Protocol Exodus during a classified briefing, senior officials had laughed. The Council would never betray humanity's trust. They said, "We are partners in galactic civilization," they said. Junho had smiled politely and continued building his contingency plans anyway. Now those plans were saving lives and protecting human interests across 200 solar systems. His assistant knocked and entered. "Sir, the last civilian transport just cleared the Kryn sector. Military escort is maintaining perimeter. 0 incidents." Junho nodded. "And the embassy staffs? All extracted. The trade offices are empty. Research facilities have been cleared and sanitized. We left nothing behind except furniture." 1. Good. Junho pulled up a different screen, this one showing economic data. The numbers were fascinating. The evacuation had cost humanity 17 billion credits in terminated contracts, abandoned leases, and transport expenses. But the intelligence value of what they had learned in 15 years of Council membership? Priceless. Humanity now knew which species could be trusted and which could not. They knew which technologies the Council suppressed and which markets were artificially controlled. They knew the Council's military capabilities, its political fault lines, and its deepest institutional weaknesses. They had entered the Council as naive newcomers. They were leaving as educated opponents. Opponents, Junho thought. Not enemies. Not yet. But definitely not friends. Across human space, Governor Minji was dealing with different problems. She stood in the command center of Frontier Station 7, looking at supply projections. The frontier colonies had relied heavily on Council trade networks. Now, those networks were gone. "How long before the food shortages?" she asked her logistics officer. 4 months at current consumption. "But we have the hydroponic expansions coming online in 6 weeks. If we implement rationing immediately, we will be fine." "Do it." "What about medical supplies?" "That is more complicated. 15 medicines were exclusively manufactured in Council space. We have enough for 3 months. Minji tapped her fingers on the console. "Get me a line to the pharmaceutical research centers. Tell them they have 3 months to reverse engineer those medicines or develop alternatives. Unlimited funding. 2. Presidential authorization. They will say it is impossible. Then they will fail trying. But I think they will succeed." Minji smiled slightly. "Human doctors are very good when properly motivated." Way. She was right. Across the frontier, humanity was discovering something important. Without Council regulations, without Council oversight, without Council approval processes, human innovation was about to accelerate dramatically. On the Council border, Ambassador Kyung-soo met with the Trell Confederacy representative in a quiet room on a neutral station. The Trell were one of the few species who had genuinely befriended humanity. Ambassador Reln looked worried. "Your withdrawal has caused chaos," Reln said. 6 more species are now considering leaving the Council. Kyung-soo sipped his tea. "Which ones?" Reln listed them. Kyung-soo recognized all 6. Young civilizations, technologically advanced, politically marginalized by the Council's old guard. They had probably been watching humanity's experience with great interest. "What will you do?" Reln asked. "We will offer them the same thing we are offering the Trell Confederacy. Partnership, trade agreements, research cooperation, mutual defense treaties. But on our terms, not the Council's. You are building an alliance. We are building friendships with species who treat us as equals." Kyung-soo set down his tea. "The Council had a chance to be that for us. They chose differently." Kyung-soo. Reln was silent for a moment. "The Trell government wishes to formalize our alliance with humanity. We would like to propose a formal treaty." Kyung-soo smiled. We were hoping you would say that. Back in Council space, the effects of humanity's withdrawal were becoming impossible to ignore. Station Master Prell stood on the command deck of Trade Station Omega, staring at his screens in disbelief. Shipping traffic had dropped by 40% in 3 days. 40%. He had not realized how much galactic trade flowed through human shipping companies. The humans had been so efficient, so reliable, so reasonably priced that they had captured enormous market share without anyone noticing. Now those ships were gone, and the old Council shipping companies could not fill the gap. Delivery times were doubling. Prices were spiking. Frontier stations were reporting supply shortages. And it had only been 3 days. "Get me the Council Trade Commission," Prell ordered. 20 minutes later, he was shouting at a bureaucrat who clearly did not understand the crisis. "You do not understand. The humans were not just moving their own cargo. They were moving everyone's cargo. They had better engines, better navigation systems, better logistics software. When they left, they took the backbone of galactic shipping with them." The bureaucrat made soothing noises about temporary adjustments and market corrections. Prell ended the call and resisted the urge to throw his communicator across the deck. In the council chamber, Chancellor Mordak was learning similar lessons. His staff had prepared a report on the economic impact of humanity's withdrawal. The numbers were devastating. Human technology had penetrated deeper into galactic infrastructure than anyone realized. Human-designed translation algorithms processed 80% of interspecies communications. Human-manufactured gravitational stabilizers kept 47 space stations operational. Human medical researchers had been the primary investigators on 17 different disease control programs. All of that was now gone or going dark. Counselor Velrin reviewed the same report in his private quarters. His webbed hands trembled slightly as he scrolled through the data. His own species, the Kelros, had 3 colony worlds whose atmospheric processors were maintained by human technicians under contract. Those technicians had departed 2 days ago. The processors were still running. But when they needed repairs, there would be no one to fix them. The replacement parts were manufactured exclusively in human space. He had made inquiries about purchasing those parts. The Human Trade Ministry had sent back a polite, automated response. Human commercial relationships with Council species are suspended pending resolution of diplomatic status. Please resubmit your inquiry in 6 months. 6 months. His people might not have 6 months. Velrin drafted a message to the Council leadership, recommending immediate diplomatic outreach to humanity. Then he deleted it. He had no credibility to make such recommendations. He was the one who had leaked their classified data. In the Council chamber, a vote was being called. The motion was to declare humanity in violation of Council obligations and impose economic sanctions. The human delegation seat sat empty, a silent reminder of what had been lost. The Rin counselor stood to speak. She was young, barely 50 years old, and her species had only joined the Council a century ago. "I oppose this motion. Humanity violated no laws. They followed proper withdrawal procedures. They fulfilled all existing contracts. They gave proper notice. What exactly would we be sanctioning them for? For having dignity?" Several older counselors made sounds of disapproval. The Rin counselor continued. "Let me be clear about what happened here. We treated our newest members with contempt. We dismissed their ideas without consideration. We broadcast their classified military secrets to the entire galaxy, violating every principle of confidential diplomacy. And when they responded by legally withdrawing from this council, we are now considering punishing them for it." She looked around the chamber. Perhaps we should be asking ourselves why 6 other species are now considering withdrawal as well. The motion failed. 18 species abstained, unwilling to antagonize humanity further. 12 voted against it, outright. The message was clear. The Council was divided, and humanity had more sympathy than Mordak had realized. 5 days after the walkout, Captain Heejin's fleet crossed the border into human-controlled space. Behind them, the last human vessels were clearing Council territory. Ahead, 300 warships waited in defensive formation. Heijin opened a channel to Admiral Doyun, who commanded the defense fleet. "Well done, Captain. Proceed to rendezvous point." Heijin smiled. "Sir, I am receiving a transmission from Ambassador Taemin. He says Phase 1 is complete. We are to begin Phase 2. Acknowledged. Bring your fleet home." As the ships moved deeper into human space, Heijin looked at her tactical display. The border was now sealed. Human patrol craft were turning away. Council vessels with polite but firm messages. No exceptions. No negotiations. A message buoy activated, broadcasting to all Council frequencies. The message was simple. Human space is now closed to Council vessels. We wish you well. In her quarters, Heijin poured herself a drink and thought about what came next. Phase 2 was about building something new. Humanity had left the Council. Now they would show the galaxy what they could accomplish without the Council's restrictions. She raised her glass in a silent toast to Ambassador Taemin and every human who had walked away from the Council with their dignity intact. The galaxy thought humans had stormed out in anger. They would soon learn the truth. Humans had not left in anger. They had left with a plan. 4 months had passed since humanity closed its borders. Merchant Juan stood on the observation deck of Trade Station Kelos, watching ships come and go, and remembering when the docks used to be crowded with human freighters. Now there was just empty space where those ships used to be. Juan had made a good living as an independent trader operating on the Council border. He had been smart enough to maintain good relationships with human shipping companies, which meant reliable cargo exchanges and fair prices. Now, those relationships were worth nothing. The humans were gone, and his profit margins had collapsed. He was not alone in his suffering. Throughout the station, businesses were closing. The market district, that once bustled with activity, was now half empty. 3 restaurants had shut down last week. The repair facilities were operating at 30% capacity. A news broadcast played on the public screens. The anchor was discussing the latest crisis. The mining colony on Trevos 4 had run out of specialized drilling equipment. The equipment was manufactured exclusively by a human company. Without it, the colony could not extract the rare minerals that were its entire economy. 2,000 colonists faced evacuation. Juan changed the channel. Another news program, another crisis. A hospital on the fringe worlds could not treat a spreading plague. Human researchers had been developing the cure, and they had taken all their research with them when they left. The hospital was now requesting emergency assistance from any medical facilities that might have relevant data. No one had relevant data. The humans had been the only ones working on that particular disease. Juan turned off the screen and walked through the station corridors. He passed a group of station technicians, arguing with their supervisor. He caught fragments of the conversation. The gravitational stabilizers need recalibration. But the diagnostic software was designed by humans. We do not have the access codes anymore. Can we bypass it? Not without risking a complete system failure. If those stabilizers go down, this entire section loses artificial gravity. Juan kept walking. Every day it was something new. Some system failing. Some supply running short. Some crisis emerging because a piece of human technology or expertise was no longer available. The galaxy had not realized how dependent it had become on humanity. Now it was learning the lesson the hard way. Deep inside human space, Dr. Yunji stood in front of a holographic display, presenting her research findings to Governor Minji and the Colonial Council. The display showed technological development curves, and every line was trending sharply upward. Since we left the Council, our research productivity has increased by 47%, Unji explained. Without Council regulations limiting what we can study, without approval processes that take years, we have made breakthroughs that would have been impossible before. Governor Minji studied the data. Explain the breakthrough in faster-than-light communications. The Council restricted research in that area, claiming it was dangerous. They were actually protecting the monopoly held by 3 major Council species. Without those restrictions, our team achieved quantum entanglement communication with a range of 50 light-years. We are now installing the system on all frontier stations. And the medical research? Unyi smiled. We have successfully synthesized all 15 medicines that we previously imported from Council space. We have also developed 12 new treatments that show promising results. The Trell Confederacy has requested access to our research data. Give it to them, Minji said immediately. They stood by us when the Council tried to isolate us. We will not forget that. The presentation continued. New ship designs, improved defensive systems, advanced agricultural techniques. Humanity was not just surviving in isolation. They were thriving. How many scientists from other species have emigrated to human space? One council member asked. 347, representing 12 different species. Most of them are from younger civilizations that felt suppressed by the Council's old guard. They are contributing enormously to our research programs. Minji nodded slowly. The humans had not just left the Council. They had attracted the best and brightest from species that shared humanity's frustration with the old system. That brain drain was another blow the Council had not anticipated. In a secure facility on the edge of human territory, Admiral Doyun reviewed military reports. The information was classified at the highest levels, but the implications were clear. Human military capability had grown exponentially in 4 months, free from Council scrutiny, free from requirements to share technology, free from restrictions on weapons research. Humanity had unleashed its industrial capacity. New warships were rolling out of orbital shipyards at a rate that would have shocked the Council. These were not the ships the Council knew about. These were next-generation vessels with capabilities that made the leaked, classified data completely obsolete. Doyun pulled up a tactical simulation. It showed a hypothetical engagement between human forces and a Council fleet. The simulation ran for 40 seconds before the Council fleet was completely destroyed. The human fleet lost 3 ships. This was not arrogance. This was simple mathematics. Human engineering, unrestrained by Council regulations, had produced weapons systems that exceeded anything the Council possessed. And humanity was not stopping. Every week brought new improvements, new innovations, new advantages. Doyun closed the simulation and opened a different file. This one showed defensive deployments along the human border. 200 warships were on permanent patrol, with another 400 in reserve. The message to the Council was clear. Human space was closed, and humanity had the power to enforce that closure. His communicator chimed. Sir, we have a transmission from Council space. Chancellor Mordak is requesting emergency military assistance. Doyun raised an eyebrow. What is the nature of the emergency? The Vryn sovereignty has attacked 3 Council border worlds. Initial reports indicate heavy casualties. The Council fleet is responding, but is outnumbered. The Vryn. Doyun knew about them. A hostile empire outside Council jurisdiction that had been testing Council defenses for decades. They had always been careful to avoid humanity's patrol zones. Now, with humans gone, they were apparently testing the Council's actual defensive capabilities. What is our response? His tactical officer asked. Doyun thought about the colonists dying on those border worlds. He thought about the innocent civilians caught in the crossfire of galactic politics. Then he thought about Councillor Velrin, broadcasting humanity's classified data to the entire galaxy. Send a reply to Chancellor Mordak. Inform him that humanity defers to the Council's superior wisdom in military matters. We are, as he once noted, too inexperienced to contribute meaningfully. The officer hesitated. Sir, the casualty estimates are in the millions. I am aware. Send the message. The officer sent it. Doyun sat in his chair and felt no satisfaction. He had just condemned millions of beings to death or suffering because of pride and politics. But he also knew that humanity could not simply rescue the Council from its own failures. That would teach them nothing. The galaxy needed to understand that actions had consequences. On the Council homeworld, Councillor Velrin watched the news broadcasts in his private quarters. The Vryn attacks were devastating. The Council fleet was fighting hard, but lacked the coordination and tactical sophistication that human forces had once provided. No one had realized how much the human military liaisons had contributed to Council defensive strategy. Now those liaisons were gone. And the Council fleet was learning how to fight without them. Velryn's own species was facing a different crisis. The atmospheric processors on 2 of their colony worlds had failed. Without human technicians to repair them, the colonies had 3 weeks of breathable air remaining. After that, 2 million Kelros would suffocate. He had sent 17 requests to human space, begging for help, offering to pay any price. Every request had received the same automated response. Human commercial relationships with Council species are suspended pending resolution of diplomatic status. His people were going to die because he had been arrogant. The irony was not lost on him. In the Council chamber, a special session was underway. Chancellor Wraith, a young counselor who had recently been elected to replace Mordak, was addressing the assembly. His speech was different from what the Council usually heard. We cannot continue to ignore reality. Our withdrawal from humanity created a crisis that we are still experiencing 4 months later. Our shipping is disrupted. Our research is stalled. Our defenses are weakened. And now, species are dying because we cannot protect them without human assistance. Several older counselors made sounds of protest. Wraith raised his voice. I propose that we send a formal delegation to human space, not to demand their return, but to request dialogue. We must acknowledge our failures and seek to repair the damage we have caused. The debate lasted for hours. Finally, a vote was called. The motion passed. Narrowly, a message was prepared. Carefully worded, acknowledging the Council's errors. It requested permission to send a diplomatic delegation to discuss mutual interests. The message was transmitted to human space with high priority. For 3 weeks, there was no response. Then, finally, a single line came back. It was from Ambassador Taman. Humanity is no longer interested in Council membership. We wish you prosperity in your endeavors. The transmission ended. No explanation, no discussion, no negotiation. The Council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity was not planning to return. They were not interested in reconciliation. They had moved on, built something new, and left the Council to deal with its own problems. Merchant Juan heard about the rejection while sitting in a nearly empty bar on Trade Station Kelos. He ordered another drink and thought about his future. The Council had betrayed humanity, and humanity had responded by removing themselves from galactic civilization entirely. The scary part was not that humanity had left. The scary part was that they were apparently doing fine without the Council. Better than fine. From what Juan heard through his remaining contacts, human space was thriving. The species that had allied with humanity were prospering. Meanwhile, Council space was slowly falling apart. Juan finished his drink and made a decision. He would sell his business, take what credits he could get, and try to emigrate to human space. The future was not in the Council anymore. The future was with whatever humanity was building beyond their closed borders. He was not the only one thinking that way. Applications for immigration to human space had increased by 2,000%. Most were being denied. Humanity was being very selective about who they let in. The message was clear. The galaxy had rejected humanity once. Now humanity was returning the favor. Commander Jiwan moved through the shadows of Trade Station Kelmar with practiced ease. She wore civilian clothing and carried forged identification that identified her as a merchant from the Trell Confederacy. No one looked at her twice. The station was crowded with refugees fleeing the Vryn attacks, and one more traveler attracted no attention. She had been operating undercover in Council space for 2 months, one of a dozen human intelligence operatives gathering information. Director Junho wanted to know exactly how bad the situation was becoming. Now Jiwan was sending him reports he probably wished he did not have to read. The Vryn sovereignty had launched a full-scale invasion. 4 Council worlds had fallen. The death toll was already past 30 million, and climbing. The Council fleet was fighting desperately. But they were outmatched. The Vryn had been preparing for this for years, waiting for exactly this moment of weakness. Jiwon sat in a quiet corner of the station cantina and watched a news broadcast. The images were horrific. Cities burning. Refugee ships overcrowded with survivors. Medical facilities overwhelmed with casualties. A reporter was interviewing a station commander who had barely escaped a Vryn attack. "Where is the Council fleet?" the reporter asked. "They are doing what they can," the commander said, his voice exhausted. "But they are spread too thin. We used to have human patrols in this sector. Those patrols are gone now." Jiwon finished her drink and moved to a communication booth. She encoded a tight beam message to human space, routing it through 3 different relay points to avoid detection. The message contained detailed tactical information about the Vryn offensive, casualty estimates, and refugee movement patterns. She added a personal note at the end. "Recommend immediate intervention. Civilian casualties are catastrophic. This is not a political matter anymore. This is a humanitarian crisis." 8 hours later, she received a response from Admiral Do-yoon. "Report acknowledged. Stand by for further orders. 1. 1760 No. Renan 11. On the human homeworld, the Military Command Center was hosting an emergency meeting. Admiral Do-yoon stood at the head of the table, with Governor Minji participating via hologram from the frontier colonies. Around the table sat the military leadership, intelligence directors, and senior diplomatic staff. "The Vryn offensive has resulted in 34 million confirmed deaths," Do-yoon began. "Projections indicate another 20 million will die in the next 2 weeks if the situation continues. The Council fleet cannot stop them. The Council requested our help," someone pointed out. "We refused. We refused because Chancellor Mordak specifically told us we were too inexperienced to contribute meaningfully to galactic affairs. I sent his words back to him." Governor Minji's hologram spoke. "That was 3 months ago. The situation has changed. We are not talking about council politics anymore. We are talking about innocent civilians dying by the millions." The room was silent. Everyone knew what this decision meant. If humanity intervened, they would be breaking their own stated policy of isolation. They would be admitting that the Council's problems were somehow their responsibility. On the other hand, millions of beings were dying, species that had never insulted humanity. Civilians who had no part in the Council's arrogance. "Commander Jiwon sent a personal recommendation," Do-yoon said quietly. "She is on the ground, watching this happen. She says this is no longer about politics." "What are you proposing?" Governor Minji asked. Do-yoon pulled up a tactical map. "We send the 3rd Fleet into Vryn combat zones. We do not coordinate with the Council. We do not ask their permission. We engage the Vryn forces, protect the civilian populations, and then we leave immediately. We make it clear that we are not acting on behalf of the Council. We are acting because it is right. We noters." After, the debate lasted for 2 hours. Finally, Governor Minji called for a vote. The decision was made by a narrow margin. Humanity would intervene, but on its own terms. 3 days later, the Vryn attack fleet moved on a refugee convoy fleeing from the colony world of Prestos 3. 50 civilian ships, carrying 2 million refugees, were guarded by only 4 Council warships. The Vryn had 16 heavy cruisers. The outcome was not in doubt. The Council ships fought bravely, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. 1 was destroyed immediately. The other 3 were taking heavy damage. The refugee convoy began to scatter, trying to reach hyperspace before the Vryn could target them. Then something impossible happened. Human warships dropped out of hyperspace directly between the Vryn fleet and the refugee convoy. 37 vessels, displaying human military colors, formed a defensive wall. The lead ship broadcast a simple message. The civilian convoy is under human protection. Withdraw immediately. The Vryn commander probably laughed. His fleet outnumbered the humans. The Council fleet had proven weak. Why should humans be any different? He ordered the attack. It lasted 7 minutes. The human ships moved with a precision and coordination that the Vryn had never encountered. Their weapons were devastatingly effective. Their shields absorbed Vryn fire with minimal damage. Their targeting systems were impossibly accurate. When the engagement ended, 14 Vryn cruisers were destroyed. The remaining 2 were badly damaged and fleeing at maximum speed. The human fleet had suffered 0 casualties and minimal damage. The refugee convoy sat in stunned silence as the human ships established a protective perimeter. Medical transports appeared, offering assistance. Supply ships distributed food and emergency equipment. The humans were efficient, professional, and completely impersonal. They provided help and answered questions, but they did not engage in casual conversation. Within 6 hours, the refugee convoy was safely in Council territory, protected by human escort. Then, the human ships turned and jumped back into hyperspace, without a word to the Council forces in the area. Over the next 72 hours, the same pattern repeated across 4 different battle zones. Human fleets appeared without warning, engaged Vryn forces with overwhelming effectiveness, protected civilian populations, and then departed immediately. They ignored all Council communications. They refused all offers of coordination. The message was clear. Humanity was helping civilians, not the Council. The Vryn offensive collapsed. Their fleets retreated, having lost nearly 40% of their combat strength in 3 days. The Council had been fighting them for 2 months and barely slowed them down. Humanity had broken them in 3 days. In the Council chamber, the atmosphere was stunned. Chancellor Wraith watched recordings of the human military interventions. The technological superiority was obvious. Those were not the ships the Council knew about. Those were next-generation vessels, with capabilities that exceeded anything in the Council's arsenal. How did they develop this so quickly? Someone asked. The Trell ambassador stood. They developed it because they were no longer restricted by Council regulations. Because they did not have to submit their research for Council approval. Because they could innovate freely. He paused. This is what humanity can accomplish when we do not hold them back. Councillor Velrin watched the recordings in his private quarters. He saw human ships rescuing refugees from stations that were about to be destroyed. He saw human medical teams treating wounded civilians. He saw human supply ships distributing food and medicine to desperate colonies. One of those colonies was Kelros. One of his own species' colonies, where the atmospheric processors had failed. A human ship had appeared, delivered replacement components and repair instructions, and departed without waiting for thanks. His people were going to survive because humans had decided to help them, even though Velrin had betrayed humanity's trust. He drafted a message to Ambassador Taman. Not an official communication. A personal one. He did not ask for reconciliation. He simply acknowledged what he had done and expressed his understanding of why humanity had left. He sent the message and did not expect a response. 3 days later, he received one. It was brief. Your people did not betray us. You did. We have helped your people because they deserve help. You should consider whether the council you serve actually serves anyone but its oldest members. Velrin read the message 3 times. Then he began writing a proposal for fundamental council reform. Director Sujin sat in her office in the Human External Affairs Ministry, reviewing proposals. 7 council species had sent secret communications requesting direct treaties with humanity, bypassing the council entirely. They offered technology exchanges, mutual defense pacts, and open borders. These were young civilizations, species that had been marginalized by the council just as humanity had been. They had watched humanity's departure and its subsequent prosperity. Now they wanted to be part of whatever humanity was building. Sujin forwarded the proposals to Ambassador Taman with her recommendation. Accept them all. This was the opportunity to build something new. Not the Council's hierarchy, but a genuine alliance of equals. Taman reviewed the proposals and smiled. Humanity had not just left the Council. They had created an alternative. The Trell Confederacy had already joined them. Now 6 more species wanted to formalize their relationships. He drafted response messages, carefully worded. Humanity would accept these partnerships, but on specific terms. All members would be equals. Decisions would require consensus. Military force would be permitted only for defense or humanitarian purposes. He sent the messages and waited. Within 48 hours, all 7 species had accepted. The Alliance of Free Worlds was born. On Trade Station Kelmar, Commander Jiwan watched the news broadcasts, showing human ships evacuating the last civilians from the war zones. She smiled slightly. Humanity had proven something important in the last 3 days. They had proven that they did not need the Council's permission to do what was right. They had proven their military superiority. Most importantly, they had proven that they were building something better than what the Council offered. She encrypted a final message to Admiral Doyun. Mission complete. The galaxy is watching. They are impressed. Recommend we capitalize on this momentum. Doyun read the message and nodded. Phase 3 was about to begin. Humanity had left the Council. They had survived in isolation. They had demonstrated their capabilities. Now it was time to show the galaxy what real leadership looked like. 14 months had passed since Ambassador Taman walked out of the Council chamber. Now he stood on a neutral station, waiting in a private meeting room. The door opened, and Councillor Velrin entered, moving slowly in his environment suit designed for amphibious species. They looked at each other for a long moment. The last time they had been in the same room, Velrin had betrayed humanity's trust. Now he was here alone, without guards, without diplomatic staff, just one old counselor who had finally learned his lesson. Thank you for agreeing to meet, Velrin said quietly. Taman gestured to a seat. They sat across from each other at a simple table. No recording devices, no witnesses, just 2 diplomats having a conversation that would never appear in any official record. Why did you come? Taman asked. To understand. Velrin's translator carried the weight of genuine curiosity. Your species walked away from the Council. You survived in isolation. You built an alliance. You saved millions of lives during the Vryn invasion. And through all of this, you never asked to return to the Council. I need to understand why. Taman considered his response carefully. The Council operates on a principle of hierarchy. Old civilizations guide younger ones. Experienced species mentor newcomers. On the surface, it seems reasonable, but you disagree. I disagree with the arrogance built into that system. The assumption that age equals wisdom. The belief that newer civilizations have nothing to teach older ones. The Council preserved peace, yes, but it also preserved stagnation. Velrin was silent, processing this. Taman continued. When you broadcast our classified data, you proved something important. You proved that the Council did not see us as partners. You saw us as subordinates who needed to be reminded of our place. That was the moment we realized we would never be equals in the Council. So, we left. And now you are building something to replace us. Not to replace you. To provide an alternative. Taman leaned forward. The Alliance of Free Worlds operates on different principles. Every member species is equal, regardless of how long they have been spacefaring. Decisions require consensus, not majority vote. We share technology freely. We defend each other without question, and we innovate without artificial restrictions. The Council could reform, Velrin said. Could it? Really? Taman's voice was gentle but firm. Your institution is 2,000 years old. Its structures are designed to concentrate power in the hands of the oldest species. Reforming that would require the powerful to voluntarily give up their power. How often does that happen? Velrin had no answer. They both knew the truth. The Council would not reform, not fundamentally. There was too much invested in maintaining the existing order. What would it take for humanity to return? Velrin asked. Taman shook his head. We will not return. But species who share our values are welcome to join the alliance. As equals. Is that an invitation? It is a statement of fact. Your species, the Kelros, have applied for alliance membership. The vote will happen next month. I expect it will pass. Velrin's expression was difficult to read through his translator mask, but his voice carried surprise. My government applied without informing me? They informed Chancellor Wraith. Perhaps they thought you would oppose the decision. I would have. 14 months ago. Velrin was quiet for a moment. I was wrong about your species. I believed that youth meant inexperience, that rapid advancement meant instability. I was protecting a system that needed to be challenged. You were protecting your civilization's position in the galaxy, Taman said without judgment. That is understandable. But systems that refuse to change eventually collapse under their own weight. They talked for another hour. Velrin asked about the alliance structure, its principles, its future plans. Taman answered honestly. This was not a negotiation. It was simply one diplomat helping another understand how the galaxy was changing. When they parted, Velrin offered his hand in the human gesture of respect. Taman took it. For what it is worth, Velrin said, I am sorry for what I did. I know. And your people will not be punished for your mistake. That is what separates us from the Council. We judge species by their values, not by their representatives' failures. In the Galactic Council chamber, a vote was underway. Chancellor Wraith stood at the podium, his voice steady. The motion before this body is a vote of no confidence in the Council's current structure. If this motion passes, we will begin a complete reformation of Council principles, operations, and power distribution. The debate had been fierce. The oldest species opposed any change. The younger species demanded it. The middle-aged civilizations were split. When the vote came, the motion failed by 7 votes. Not enough species were willing to risk the stability of the known system. Even if that system was failing, Wraith watched the results display and nodded slowly. He had expected this. Change was frightening, especially for civilizations that had built their power on the existing structure. Then I must inform this body that 23 species have formally withdrawn from the Council, effective immediately. They are joining the Alliance of Free Worlds. The chamber erupted in chaos. 23 species. That was more than 10% of the Council membership. And these were not small, insignificant civilizations. These were technologically advanced, economically important species. The Council was fracturing. Over the next month, 14 more species withdrew. The exodus was not driven by anger, but by pragmatism. The Alliance was offering something the Council could not: genuine equality, rapid innovation, and effective mutual defense. On Alliance Station 1, a massive new structure built in orbit of a human colony world. The Alliance Assembly held its first full session. Director Sujin stood and watched representatives from 53 different species take their seats. There were no hierarchy markers, no senior positions. Every species had one vote. Every voice carried equal weight. It was chaotic. Species argued passionately. Debates ran long. Consensus was hard to achieve, but it was real partnership, and everyone in the room could feel the difference. Ambassador Kyung-soo, now serving as the Alliance's diplomatic coordinator, presented the first major policy proposal. It was a comprehensive trade agreement that would benefit all member species equally. The debate lasted 6 hours. Amendments were proposed, discussed, and voted on. Finally, the agreement passed with full consensus. In the Council chamber, a similar trade proposal would have been decided by the senior members in a closed meeting. Here, every species had contributed to the final document. Governor Minji watched from the observation deck and smiled. This was what humanity had built from the ashes of humiliation. Not revenge, but something better. Admiral Hagen, recently promoted to command the Alliance Defense Fleet, stood on the bridge of her flagship. The fleet now included vessels from 20 different species, all serving on integrated crews. Human engineers worked alongside Trell technicians. Kelros navigators coordinated with human tactical officers. The diversity was messy and complicated, but it made the fleet stronger. Her tactical display showed the defensive perimeter around Alliance space. 200 warships on patrol, with 400 more in reserve. The Alliance was not looking for conflict, but they were absolutely prepared to defend themselves. A communication came through from the border. A Council exploration vessel had approached Alliance space and requested permission to conduct scientific research in a nearby nebula. Hagen considered the request. Under old Council rules, such permission would have required months of negotiation and probably would have been denied for political reasons. "Grant permission," she said. "Assign an escort to ensure they do not stray into restricted zones. Offer to share our research data on that nebula, if they are willing to share theirs." The Council vessel accepted immediately. Scientific cooperation did not require political alignment. Dr. Unji read the Council research data with interest. It complemented the Alliance's own studies perfectly. She sent a response with detailed Alliance findings, along with an invitation for the Council scientists to visit Alliance research facilities if they wished to collaborate further. 3 of them accepted. They arrived 2 weeks later, nervous about entering Alliance space, but curious about what they might learn. Dr. Yunji treated them as colleagues, not outsiders. They worked together for a month and produced a joint research paper that advanced understanding of stellar formation by decades. When they returned to Council space, they told everyone about the experience. The story spread. More Council scientists began requesting collaborations. The Alliance approved them all. Knowledge, humanity had decided, should not be restricted by politics. 2 years after the walkout, the galaxy had settled into a new equilibrium. The Galactic Council still existed, but it was diminished. 87 species remained members, down from 200. The Council had begun implementing reforms, slowly and reluctantly, recognizing that change was necessary for survival. Chancellor Wraith worked tirelessly to modernize the institution. Some of his reforms passed. Many did not. But the fact that he was trying earned him respect from Alliance leadership. The Alliance of Free Worlds had grown to 112 member species. They controlled nearly 30% of explored space. Their economy was thriving. Their research was producing breakthrough after breakthrough. Their military was the most advanced in the galaxy. More importantly, they had proven that a different kind of galactic civilization was possible. Ambassador Taman stood in the Alliance Assembly, now held in a massive station that rivaled the Council's grandest structures. He watched a debate about colonization rights in a newly discovered system. The discussion was spirited but respectful. Multiple species wanted access to the system. Instead of fighting over it, or letting the oldest species claim priority, they were working out a sharing agreement. It took 3 days to reach consensus. The final agreement gave every interested species access to different parts of the system, with protected zones for indigenous life forms that might exist. It was complicated and imperfect, but it was fair. Velrin sat in the observation gallery. He had emigrated to Alliance space 6 months ago. After the Kelros formally joined, he no longer served in government, but he attended assembly sessions as a private citizen, watching the organization he had once dismissed prove itself superior to the Council he had defended. He caught Taman's eye and nodded. Taman nodded back. No words needed. They both understood what had been built here. In a quiet office on Alliance Station 1, Director Junho reviewed intelligence reports. The Vrin sovereignty had been quiet since their failed invasion. Other hostile forces were watching the Alliance warily. None of them were eager to test the Alliance's military capabilities. Peace through strength, Junho thought. But also peace through principle. The Alliance fought only when necessary, but they fought effectively. They preferred cooperation, but were prepared for conflict. They were not naive idealists. They were practical builders of a better system. Merchant Juan operated a successful trading company now, working out of an Alliance port. His business had tripled since moving to Alliance space. The opportunities here were extraordinary. The restrictions were minimal. The species treated each other fairly. He sometimes thought about the day he had watched human freighters disappear from Council space, leaving behind economic chaos. At the time, he had thought it was a disaster. Now he understood it was the beginning of something better. 50 years later, a historian would write a comprehensive analysis of this period. The text would be studied in schools across Alliance space. The Great Walkout marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. Humanity did not leave the Galactic Council because they were insulted. They left because they recognized a fundamental incompatibility between Council principles and their own values. The Council believed in hierarchy, in the wisdom of age, in controlled stability. Humanity believed in equality, in the value of innovation, in earned respect. When forced to choose, humanity chose their principles. They walked away from galactic civilization rather than compromise their values. And in doing so, they invited others to join them in building something new. The Alliance of Free Worlds succeeded not because humanity conquered the galaxy, but because they offered an alternative built on respect, on partnership, on the radical idea that every civilization deserved an equal voice regardless of age or power. 212 species eventually joined the Alliance. The old Council survived in reduced form, slowly implementing reforms inspired by Alliance success. Both organizations coexisted, sometimes cooperating, sometimes competing, always pushing each other toward improvement. But history remembers the moment Ambassador Taman closed his briefcase and walked out of the Council chamber. That single act of dignity, that refusal to accept disrespect, changed the course of galactic civilization, not through violence or threat, but through the simple power of choosing principle over convenience. Humanity did not storm out in anger. They walked out with clarity. And in the space they left behind, they built something that proved worthy of respect.